This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
There's been a province-wide trapping contest targeting wolves just launched in the province of Alberta. We're going to get to that in this episode of the show. I would almost guarantee that this story has not been on the radar of, I don't know, John, 95%
I didn't know about
of our audience members. Mm-hmm. I think just because there's so much going on right now, we're like less than a week away from the American election. We've got our premier, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith leadership review coming up. We've had tight elections in BC and Saskatchewan.
We're busy right now.
There's a lot going on right now. We were talking a lot of federal politics in our most recent episode. That's the 30th of October. If you want to check that out, Pierre Poilievre going head-to-head with Liberal Housing Minister Sean Fraser. Honestly, one of my favorite exchanges in the House of Commons in a long time. I know not everybody agrees. You put together a great short
of
these two
best
going back and
exchanges
forth.
I've ever seen. Ever.
I blasted out on my Instagram yesterday, and I said, I got to be honest. I said, I love this stuff. These two going at each other's throats, and Fraser calling Poilievre the Timu version of a right-wing leader, and Poilievre talking to Fraser about arrogance and ego and incompetent. And I was just like, bing, bang, boom. And we heard from a lot of you that don't necessarily see eye to eye. Real Talker Andy wrote in, and he said, this is absolutely unprofessional. And I found myself... I couldn't 100% disagree with him, but since when do we expect professionalism 100% of the time? In all seriousness, though, we're covering a lot of ground, and this is the ground we're going to cover today, that wolf trapping contest in just a quick second. Now, I guarantee we're going to hear from some real talkers, maybe some of you that are like ranchers or you keep livestock, or maybe you're hunters. They're calling this a program to the Alberta Ungulate Enhancement Program. In other words, and our guest, Kim Odlan, in a second is going to clarify this for us. But I'm pretty sure that this is to help like elk and caribou and deer populations, the animals that wolves prey on. And I would imagine that hunters are pretty keen on that, but there's got to be more to the story. So we'll dig in on that. Kim's with the Exposed Wildlife Conservancy. We talked to them, Kim's colleague, Johnny Marriott, the wildlife photographer, a couple of months back about Alberta lifting the ban on grizzly hunting for the so-called problem bears. And we're talking business today as well. Shauna Feth, President and CEO of the Alberta Chambers of Commerce, basically, I don't know her entire team, we'll ask, but a whole bunch of Western Canadian representatives, a lot of them from Alberta, were just in Halifax for the Canadian Chamber of Commerce AGM, and it sounds like a lot of Alberta's business priorities were front and center. They adopted like 10 policies proposed by Alberta Chambers, approved by the federal network. So that's got to be great news if you're doing business in Alberta. We'll talk about that with Shauna. She's got her eye on Alberta Business, all coming up as part of this episode of the show. This episode is happening because of the team at Business Career College. Speaking of doing business, John and I waxed for like 15, 20 minutes yesterday. We didn't mean to do it, but I couldn't help myself.
What, the Bitcoin?
Just talking about Bitcoin and where it's at. And I'm not telling you to buy Bitcoin. I'm not telling you to. I'm not giving you any financial advice. It's just a fascinating story.
But it's looking good.
I'm not telling you not to buy Bitcoin either. And I'm also reminding you, if you would have bought Bitcoin when we were first talking about it, you would have doubled your money. But I digress. A lot of people think, that Bitcoin is nothing. Some people think Bitcoin's going to be gone in 5 years. Whatever the case, if you're a financial advisor or financial planner, you have to have credible insight into this, because the next generation of investors are interested in this kind of stuff, decentralized finance. They have questions about blockchain and Bitcoin and NFTs and a whole bunch of it, and you have to be able to at least give them what you think. I mean, that's why they're coming to you in the first place, right? Why not extend your own career, broaden your depth of knowledge by getting a new designation from Business Career College? That's the Certified Digital Asset Advisor designation, the CDAA. If you sign up today at businesscareercollege.com using the promo code Ryan20, all one word, Ryan20, they'll knock 20% off your investment right then and there. That's Ryan20 at businesscareercollege.com. Let's find out what's going on with wolves in Alberta. Nobody wants to run into a pack of wolves when they're lost in the forest, but I think we can all marvel at the beauty of these apex predators. Truly one of the most magnificent animals, one of the most fascinating animals that live in community. in Western Canada and, of course, in other jurisdictions around the world. Their population is under threat right now as the Exposed Wildlife Conservancy has discovered that a province-wide trapping-killing contest has been launched by the Alberta Trapping Association. Kim Odlan is a co-founder of Exposed Wildlife Conservancy and a licensed trapper as well. Kim, do I have the right information in front of me? What's going on? Are there shenanigans there, Kim?
Thanks, Ryan. First of all, thanks for having me on, guys. I actually, what I did is I actually took the trapping course. I thought it was important for me to get as educated as I could on the whole issue of trapping. So I actually took the trapping course by the Alberta Trapping Association. So I am, in fact, I have a license that I could actually go out and trap and kill wildlife. So I've never done it, but I could if I wanted to.
Okay, so technically you are a licensed trapper in the province of Alberta, but you're not trapping animals.
No, not at all.
Okay, so I have interviewed trappers in past. I have a memorable interview that I'm thinking back to in my radio days, where I talked to like a father and son duo that had been in it for years, and they're passionate about what they do, and they obviously care about the environment. And I remember making them a promise that I was going to hear them out. This show's called Real Talk, Kim. So my thing is like the thought of an animal slowly suffocating out in the wild with something around, a snare around its neck, kind of makes me sick. It feels like a torturous and barbaric way to go. But then I also know that people have survived this way for many years. I know that there are implications that probably Indigenous communities have employed these methods. Perhaps, I don't know. I'm here to learn. But I remember making a commitment to hear them out. And by the end of it, I kind of went, I got to admit, I've got some respect for what they're doing. I respect their perspective. I might not agree with it, but I'm not out there trapping. So here's my cards on the table, okay? So how have you seen trapping through the years? Let's talk about it, even before we get into the wolves in particular.
Yeah. Well, I guess I came into it 10 or 12 years ago. I originally met Johnny Marriott. He's arguably one of Canada's most prolific and awarded journalist or photographer in wildlife. He actually just received the Academy Awards, if you will, of wildlife photography earlier this month in London, England, where he received Photographer of the Year award. So he really knows his stuff, and he's really spent his entire lifetime out in the field, and actually spending lots of time with trappers and hunters and things. So certainly, we understand that there are people that do that, and we recognize that, and this is when we talk about things specifically like a killing contest. This is not really something that we're not suggesting that we're against trappers per se. It's just the practice and some of the tools that they use in their trapping that we just find incredibly offensive. They're very cruel, and we think that this is something that's from the past. This is back in the 1800s, 1700s, when trapping really became in the forefront. And while it did play a large role in the actual formation of Canada, things change. And when it comes to many forms of trapping and how it's done, it just hasn't changed. And we think we're way past that time that we need to be changing some of these really archaic devices that are used, and just the overall understanding of trapping and why we actually trap.
What did you learn about trapping that you might not have already known when you took that trapping course over the weekend, paid the $20 fee, and became a licensed trapper?
Well, I think for me, it was the fact of how much trapping is actually still going on in Alberta and elsewhere. I never really realized. I really did think it was something that was in the past, and we all talked about trapping and understanding of that when we were in school, but I didn't realize it was going on. There's over 1,600 licensed trap lines just in Alberta, and so it's amazing actually. If you spend any time out in the wilderness, chances are you're going to be on a trap line, and I think that most Albertans, most people don't realize that. There's certainly some safety considerations regarding that. There's many reports of pets being caught in traps, and particularly when I'm talking about traps, I'm talking particularly about neck snares and killing neck snares, which are the most prolific device out there that trappers use to kill animals with. They're very cheap. They can be You can literally set up hundreds of them in a particular area very quickly. And they're indiscriminate in the fact that they'll kill anything that walks into them, or they're unfortunate to walk into their path, which would include pets or even people for that matter.
Is there evidence that any of that's happening? That like somebody's Shih Tzu has got caught in a line, or a hiker or something like that?
Oh, certainly, Ryan. Not so much people, but certainly pets. And yeah, I don't suggest that that it happens all the time or that it's a daily occurrence by any means, but it certainly does happen. And just a quick Google search will show that there's many pets that have been trapped and killed or severely injured, and in areas where you're not really expecting to see that. I've done a documentary on. We have actually done a couple of smaller documentaries on trapping and traps, and in particular, one was specifically about animals that have been caught, and it was in Kananaskis country, so not in a national park, but in the actual Kananaskis area, and it's an area that's totally frequented by hikers, and people have been going there for years and years, and literally steps off one of the main trails, there's a trap line. And there was no indication that there was a trap line. Trappers are supposed to put notification that there is a trap line, but they often don't want to do that because people can come and mess with their traps. So they sort of avoid making them too aware. But yeah, no, it definitely happens.
I was curious to see early on where our YouTube live chat would wind up on this. Sharon, who's been on the show before, of Métis Heritage, says trapping was part of my growing up. She says we never trapped wolves. Travis says a well-made trap actually should be constructed in a way that minimizes suffering. Dwayne says there are remote areas where people can't go to a grocery store, and that's why they do this. So people have a whole bunch of people aren't necessarily piling on the history of trapping. There's other people saying just because we've done something 300 years ago, it doesn't mean we should be doing it now. So differing opinions, I bet you, that's probably reflective of the population, right? Like if you have somebody that grew up doing it, it's a big part of their heritage and their customs and their traditions, then this is going to be something a way for them to connect with the land, a way for them to live sustainably, etc. And if you have somebody that like grew up in the heart of the city and I don't know, like had peas and lentils last night, then this is probably something that they're going to be horrifically offended by, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I always go back to the fact that there's plenty of things in our past that we don't do anymore. And just because they happened in the past doesn't mean they should be happening today. I mean, there's so many examples. I mean, you can really go down the rabbit hole, and even like slavery, but residential schools and all these different things these are things that are part of our past. But does that necessarily mean that they should be part of our future? And the reasons for doing some of the things that we did in the past are simply not relevant today. And I would include trapping, in particular with killing neck snares, a big part of that. There's just really, there's no really evidence to suggest that is something we should be doing using killing neck snares.
Most people are going to hear this on the podcast, but Kenzie is watching us live on YouTube. She says she says just incredible visuals and photography. Is this all Johnny Marriott's work, or this is your team at Exposed Wildlife Conservancy?
It's primarily John's. We do have some contributors that help us with that as well, but primarily it is John, yeah, for sure.
Okay, amazing. Just wanted to give credit where it's due. So, and then we have Horse Lake Ranch in the chat, and I knew we were going to get comments like this because this is real life. Yeah. Horse Lake says, my neighbor had a wolf killing calves, and a trapper came and got the wolf. And if each calf, I don't know what the price of beef is right now, but if that's looking at $2,500 for you, $3,000 for you down the road, you can't let that happen 5 or 6 or 7 times. So let's talk about, the impact that wolves are having on industry and on human populations. Let's talk about the impact humans have had on wolf populations. Let's get into that.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I definitely, when you bring up the example of ranchers and some of the attacks and some of the losses they might receive from wolves, the issue that I think we would have with that is that, first of all, there's a compensation program in place, so the ranchers are compensated for their cattle that are lost or wildlife or their sheep or whatever that are lost due to wolves and predators. So there is a compensation program for that. So it's not necessarily a complete loss for that. But the bigger issue with that is the way of wolves' behavior. Wolves are pack animals. They typically hunt in packs, and they generally stay away from ranchers and cattle, and certainly there will be some examples where someone will call in and say, yeah, I know some people, and it does happen, and I don't want to diminish the fact that it does, but it is very rare in the overall scheme of things. But the big issue with this sort of, and I'll go back to this killing contest, is that this is not done to protect cattle and ranching. This is done, it's actually framed exactly under this ungulate protection program where they're asserting that the wolves are out there killing all the moose and deer and elk, so that it's going to make it difficult for them to actually go kill them themselves when it comes into hunting season. And this program is actually done in conjunction with the Alberta Outfitters Association. So it really has nothing to do with wolves and conflict. It's really, they're framing it under this idea that wolves are killing the ungulates population that they would like to go out and hunt.
Mark, in the live chat, I want to get to as many of these as I can because, we've got an audience across Canada and a wide swath across Alberta. Mark says coyotes getting calves is rare, but I lost some this year. He says there's a lot of coyotes and fox because of the runaway ground squirrel population. We're not talking about coyotes, but coyotes and wolves, I guess, probably have some similar or some shared prey, in particular targeting ranchers and farmers.
Yeah, there is some similarities. I think that wolves are quite different. They're more of an apex predator. Coyotes are much more opportunistic type of killing, and certainly a coyote would have a hard. They generally hunt on their own, so the chances of them actually taking down anything very large would be very remote. So there definitely would be in a different category.
Also, Kim, I try to sort of acknowledge and admit hypocrisy wherever it exists, and I'm far more troubled by killing wolves than coyotes, and I can't explain that. Yeah. I just am. It's like when I get pissed off when people kill dolphins, but I love killing ahi tuna. There's no logic behind it. It's just the way that the human mind works. Yeah. So let's acknowledge this hunting, this trapping killing contest has not happened yet. It's slated for spring 2025. Is that right? You're trying to stop it right now?
No, it's actually happening now.
Oh, it's happening now. Okay.
It's happening now. I actually got the notification, and it coincides with the opening of trapping season. So I actually got the notification on September 30th, which is Monday. It was actually the Day of Reconciliation for Indigenous peoples, but it was actually on a holiday, and I received the notification. And so what really disturbed me and disturbed us and lots of other people is the fact that just the whole killing contest prize aspect to it. This is not done from the realms of caring for animals. I mean, I guess I look at the Alberta Trapping Association or Alberta Trappers Association, and their mandate is, their mission statement, in fact, is to ensure, and I'm going to read it here, to ensure that trapping continues in Alberta as a way of life that promotes respect for wildlife and stewardship of the land. And I would argue that a killing contest is probably the furthest thing from showing respect for wildlife. And I guess that's what really we get concerned about, is that, and there's no science to back it up. I guess that would be the other thing, Ryan, is there's absolutely no science that would say that this rampant killing and non-selective killing of wolves is going to do anything to enhance the ungulate population. In fact, all of the studies that we've been able to find have shown that it's exactly the opposite. That surprisingly, when you start randomly killing wolves, the actual population of ungulates and moose and deer and things actually increase over time. And the only way that you could have some success in hunting wolves and helping populations is if you kill the entire pack. So they are pack animals. So the only way is if you were to kill the entire pack of animals in a strategic way, then perhaps you would show a short increase of ungulate populations, but very quickly another pack would move in. wolves completely control their own populations through territory control. So there's only a certain number of wolves that can survive in a certain area based on the prey that's there, the wild prey that's there, and they police themselves. They actually control their own numbers, which I think we find in nature. In most things in nature, when we really delve into it, nature does have a way of taking care of itself.
In a way that many humans could not stomach. Nature's
Exactly.
methods of population control are, well, I just refer people to the Instagram account Nature is Metal, and you can watch nature controlling its own populations in real time. Yeah. Yeah. So I do want to note, Sylvia's asking in the chat, appreciate her contribution to our live chat on YouTube. She says, isn't this Todd Lowen's outfitting? It's not. Alberta's Minister of Forestry, Parks and Tourism, the Honorable Todd Lowen, is an investor and receives dividends from Red Willow Outfitting, but as far as I know, this is not an Alberta government initiative, right? Is this sanctioned by the Alberta government?
Well, I guess, I'm actually not sure, Ryan. The way it's worded, they're calling it the Alberta Ungulate Enhancement Program, which really sounds like an official name.
Sounds very official.
Yeah, it sounds very official. I think it is just made up, but it definitely is in conjunction with the Outfitters Association. So I know Minister Lowen's background in that. So I would be shocked if he wasn't aware of this. One of the big questions that we have is, where is the money to fund this contest coming from? We know that the Alberta Trapping Association is heavily funded by the Alberta government. So maybe they're not directly involved, but in a roundabout way, there must be some involvement in that. I mean, it's certainly not being done under a cloud of secrecy. I mean, they're putting it out there. First prize, $5,000. And what particularly offends me is the idea that they also get a top wolf buckle, so that they can have something to, walk around and be proud of. It. It's almost like winning a trophy award. I just find that particularly offensive. So $5,000 for the best wolf from basically now until the end of May. And then subsidiary prizes of $3,000 and $2,000.
Kim, let me ask you.
I just find it very offensive to do that.
Let me guarantee that neither you nor I will be out on those trap lines, and probably neither you nor I will kill a wolf this year. But I want to ask you why you're offended about the buckle. Like humans throughout history, like I'm married into a hunting family, and they do it nobly and ethically. And when they have like an elk rack or I don't know that there's anything wrong with trophies from successful hunts. I hate trophy hunting. Grizzly hunting pisses me off. When people hunt giraffes and lions, it really pisses me off. And I know that I'm going to open up a bunch of cans by saying all of this. But honestly, what's wrong with a buckle for the best wolf?
Well, it is I think it goes to your thoughts on trophy hunting. Trophy hunting, right?
But I mean,
it's trophy hunting in a way, and I know the particular, maybe an elephant, or a grizzly bear, is sexier than a wolf from a contest perspective. But it really is a trophy contest, and these wolves, the trappers that are doing this, it is a trophy to them, and then they're hopefully, in addition to the prize money, they're hoping to sell the pelts and sell the fur. So so this has nothing to do with from a standpoint of traditional hunting, where it's sustenance hunting. It's people will kill a deer and they'll eat meat, and I eat meat, so it'd certainly be completely hypocritical of me to start suggesting that isn't something we do, and I understand that, but to actually have prizes for literally just for killing an animal with no reason. There's no, I guess I'd want to really reinforce that. There's no reason for this. There's no scientific evidence to say that it really does anything to protect people or wildlife, or it's literally it's a contest. It's a game. And I just don't think in today's society that's something that we should be doing.
One of the things that I think is jumping out at me, and I sure appreciate your perspective. This is Kim Odlan from Exposed Wildlife Conservancy. If you're just joining us on the Mixler live streaming audio app presented by California Closets, we're talking about a trapping contest, wolves in the province of Alberta. What threw me off on the dates is that I guess the pelts can be submitted for consideration from the end of May to the beginning of July of next year. So obviously there's stuff work that goes into that ahead of time. What's jumping out at me here, and I don't want to sort of gloss over this, is the use of neck snares. I think that this is relevant to point out there's an agreement, an international agreement on humane trapping standards signed in 1997, a couple of years later ratified by Canada to establish humane trapping methods and enhance communication and cooperation on the parties and to facilitate fur trades. And they accommodated Canada's request that neck snares be excluded in the agreement. Canada's position is that neck snares were obviously inhumane, and that it was a priority that Canadian trappers trap wild animals humanely and ethically. Are neck snares still being used in Canada? And if so, is that not a violation of this international agreement?
Well, it's interesting, right? It is very complicated. So neck snares are used. In fact, they would be the single most used trapping device in Canada, would be killing neck snares. And they were eliminated from the AIHTS at Canada's request. So this is an international group that was formed in late 1990, the 1990s. And it was originally signed in 1997, and then it was ratified in 1999. Canada insisted in order to sign this agreement, they needed to exclude neck snares. So the way that they got around that is they weren't titled killing devices specifically. So the AIHTS regulations were specifically regarding killing devices and the length of time that it took to kill an animal, and which they've ascertained should be 5 minutes. So 300 seconds. If an animal can be killed within that 300-second time frame is considered humane under the regulations. But neck snares were excluded from that because Canada argued that these aren't killing devices per se, and they should be allowed. Now, part of that agreement also said that it would be reviewed within 3 years, so that there would be a review of killing neck snares to show and actually if there could be any evidence that they would actually kill within that time frame. And that was back in late 1990, 2000. So it's been almost 25 years. And that study and that has never been brought up again. So meanwhile, killing neck snares are still allowed under the AIHTS, which is what the trapping community uses as their argument. Well, we're doing everything we can. We're going along with the AIHTS regulations, but killing neck snares have never been proven to actually kill within that time, and especially when it comes to larger predators like a wolf. We all know we have dogs. We understand that, you get a big dog and you have an understanding of the kind of musculature that they have in their neck and shoulder region. And by having a wolf walk into that and getting snared and attempting to try and choke it to death in a very short period of time is extremely difficult, if not impossible. Now, trappers will argue that that's not the case, but there's been no evidence to suggest that they have, and they haven't released a single report that shows that killing neck snares actually kill within that required time.
I've got a comment here from Alberta Girl. She says, we have bear, cougars, wolves, coyote populations are growing in areas that they never were before, largely due to forest fires and lack of trapping. What's your response to that? I know that Exposed Wildlife Conservancy, you guys are particularly focused on apex predators, right? Like you guys are particularly focused on, bears and wolves and cougars and those sorts of things. Does Alberta Girl have a point?
Well, I would say that populations do have a tendency to fluctuate. That's just part of nature. But as far as not having enough trapping or due to lack of trapping, I don't understand that. I'll go back to what I started talking about. There's over 1,600 trap lines in Alberta. There's really, I would say there's far less areas in Alberta that don't have that don't have trapping that have trapping. So I mean, the vast majority of Alberta is covered with trap lines and traps. So there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of traps out there. So I would argue that because there's a lack of trapping, I would suggest that's. I would have to see some evidence of that because it's certainly not what we see.
what's best case? I mean, obviously, best case scenario for you is that they call off this contest, but guaranteed they're not going to.
Correct.
No insult to your advocacy, but they're just not going to. They probably don't care
Correct.
what you
Yeah.
or I have to say about this. So ultimately,
Exactly.
I mean, is this about public education? Is this about putting this on? I mean, you opened the show talking about how nobody knows that this is going on unless they're trappers, because everybody's attention is being pulled in a million different ways. What are you hoping to accomplish?
Absolutely. Well, Ryan, I think it is actually, it is absolutely public awareness. I think the public needs to know these things. And part of the reason I actually got involved with Exposing with John is I would go on these photo trips with John, and we would get talking around dinner or the campfire at night, and to start talking about wildlife issues. And what became very apparent to me very early on is that people really don't understand that this whole idea of wildlife management is really just not there. I mean, there are people in government. Certainly, there are biologists that really definitely care about wildlife and do a great job in their areas. But generally, people really have no idea. It's sort of behind the scene, and part of that is the fact that there's so few people doing it. Like there's the population in Alberta. I think it's 0.002% of the population that actually traps. I mean, this is just literally a handful of people that are responsible for managing our wildlife. And I just think that that's wrong. I think there needs to be a real awakening of that, and people need to understand what's going on. And in the bigger picture, if you think about Canada, tourism dollars in Canada, they're huge. People come from all over the world to visit our province and visit our country. And one of the big reasons they come is for our wildlife, and wolves in particular. I think people are just thrilled if they happen to get a chance to see a wolf, and they are diminishing, in fact, the opportunities to do that. So, and I don't think people in the rest of the world understand Canada's views on wildlife. I think they look at us as a beacon of supporting wildlife and our apex predators, and that's certainly not the case. And so I think that's really what we're trying to do.
Kim, it's been great talking to you, and I appreciate your passion. I've got even more folks in here just commenting on the quality of photography. So thanks again to John E. Marriott for making his images available. You look like you want to say something in closing.
Well, I just have one last point. I guess that I was talking about the tourism component of things, and one of our concerns is there's really no evidence to suggest that these trapping contests and just going out and just killing as many wolves as you can actually does anything for any kind of control of ungulate. And I would use an example of that as our parks, our national parks. And there's no trapping allowed in our national parks. And our populations of moose and deer and elk in our national parks is very strong. And wolves are there and they're not being trapped. And so I go back to this idea that nature does look after itself and it manages populations, and so this just wanton killing of wolves for their fur and for money is just it's just not something that we should be supporting. I don't think, right? Taxpayer dollars, particularly in Alberta and of course in Canada beyond. So
I'm kind of like I'm researching this on the fly as we're talking, because I'm remembering reading about these wolf calls that were happening. Alberta not alone in these, but I'll reference Wallace Snowden's reporting for the CBC back in June of this year. So, beginning of the summer, culling wolves alters the survivors, and that could be bad news for caribou. It goes on to report on when wolves are killed by bullets fired from helicopters. It really is like kind of a dramatic thing to see. Says surviving members of the pack quickly learn to evade the threat. A new study has found for nearly 20 years, Alberta's killed off hundreds of gray wolves every year in an attempt to bolster dwindling caribou populations, a practice critics have described as a misguided measure to help herds on the brink recover from habitat loss. I know we're talking about kind of apples and oranges, but both involving wolves here. Do you have a thought on the call?
Yeah, I mean the call, it falls in the same category. Again, it's random killing. There again, if there's any science that supported it, it would certainly be something that we would look at. But there's no science to support any of that. I would encourage people to go to our website, trappedinthepast.com. We have a 3-part documentary that we just released that answers a lot of these questions and actually addresses a lot of these particular issues. And then just on our website at exposedwildlifeconservancy.org, we have a complete information base on wolves, in particular, and trapping. And so I think people could really get some education on it. And that's really what we're after. It really is trying to expose, if you will, the kind of practices that are happening in our wildlife today.
Appreciate it, Kim. Thanks for doing the show. We appreciate you reaching out.
Well, thank you guys very much. And I guess happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. What are you going as? You have a big party planned for tonight?
No, actually not. I got a bunch of grandkids that are just over the moon excited about it. So we'll be spending some fun time with them for sure.
Attaboy. There you go. Quality family time. That's Kim Odlan. He's a co-founder along with John E. Marriott of Exposed Wildlife Conservancy. Again, exposedwildlifeconservancy.org. The live chat is and I love this actually, is like not, there's no consensus in the live chat on this one. Like I can see, a whole bunch of people talking about sort of the historical, the relationship that trappers have had with the land and how that's been used as population management and traditions and those sorts of things. I've got a lot of people that I obviously sort of have no time for this, and this is bugging them. There was one comment in particular, I think it was from Peaches, who said something like, I don't remember exactly, but stick to your soy lattes and your downtown crime and let country folks handle the country.
Why is soy always in the mix?
Well, yeah. What did soy? Show us where soy hurt you?
Everyone
isn't all the
eats soy
soy
every day, whether they're vegan or it's in everything.
I think once they found that soy could rhyme with boy, and then they could sort of throw soy boy out on Twitter, and it became a very popular insult. I think that's probably where soy
doesn't hurt me.
But aren't farmers aren't in soy being grown around the world? Isn't that like probably a pretty valuable crop for a lot of people?
Soy isn't.
We don't want to be piling on soy.
What you're eating for lunch today?
Yeah.
Literally, soy is in everything.
Yeah. So you could soy is big cold temperate areas in the U.S. and Canada are very suitable for growing soybeans, and so we do grow soy in Canada, and Canadian farmers, as a matter of fact, have proudly produced soybeans for more than 7 decades.
Love edamame.
And today, soy is grown on more than 31,000 family farms in Canada across 7 different provinces.
We should get a shirt.
That's pretty
I'm for
impressive.
soy boy.
That's pretty impressive. Do you have I feel like these are
an opinion here?
There are certain circumstances where you go, do I have to chime in on this one? But
I'm a big animal
take on this.
I'm a big animal lover. But I love humans as well. We got to learn to live with animals. I understand that we're on the planet and here cohabitating, but it's hard, especially here in Alberta. Like I have a small dog and I see coyotes, and of course I'm scared for my animals. And I'm sure as a rancher, a farmer, it's even more because it's your investment, it's your livelihood. So, and I understand that we have to. I don't like it, but there has to be calls. There has to be controlling of animal population as they take over other populations. And, we could get into all the things about magpies and all the destructive wildlife if there becomes too many of them. But for me, when we're talking about neck trapping with wires and stuff like that, I saw Wise Kyle say something in the chat, what's the difference between this and a rifle? Well, I think there's a big difference between snaring an animal by the neck and having it die slowly in the cold than euthanizing it quickly. So
yeah, but listen, to be fair here, and I see you at Horse Lake Ranch in the chat that says, believe it or not, trappers don't want animals to suffer. I believe that.
I believe that too.
I think that there's a lot of trappers that approach their craft because their dad or their grandma or 5 generations, their family's been doing it forever, and they're proud to do it, and it's how they feed their family. And I don't think that anybody.
But when you see a flyer like this,
but here's the thing: if a snare works in 5 minutes, if you're bow hunting, which in my mind is bow hunters are wired differently, man. You have a bull moose 30 meters away from you, and you're it's unbelievable. I got respect for that. It's not something I could ever do myself, but when you put one, you put it, you let's say you get the moose through both lungs. That moose isn't done right away, right? It's gonna, you're hoping that it stops within 100 meters or so. I barely know what I'm talking about, but this is what hunters tell me. They're not killed instantly. 5 minutes to me sounds like, I don't know. I mean, whatever. But like, I see people in here talking about power snares versus regular snares, and they say that power snares should work within 5 minutes. I don't know what's worse. You know what I think is worse is like, these old school bear traps. I don't know if they're using them anymore, but these, the ones like the ones you see in the Disney movies from the 1970s where they were still allowed to show that stuff. These claw traps that close, and then the animal's trapped there for like hours or days in distress and like gnawing its own leg off so it can get out of there. We're losing people who are eating breakfast right now.
Yeah,
That's the stuff where I'm not sure about. But I also recognize that like people, I mean, Jordan Tutu was sitting in this studio, 3 weeks ago, talking about, his family's traditions and like seal hunts. And like, are you going to talk to, First Nations or Indigenous or Inuit populations about whaling, like from our spot in the cities and impose our perspective on what's ethical and what's not? I don't think so.
But I don't think Jordan Tutu's upbringing was using wire snares to drain wolves.
We might be surprised, man.
Brains of blood.
We might be surprised. Yeah. We might be surprised. Like snaring is. So anyway, all I'm saying is I want to approach this. This show wants to approach issues without our minds made up every single time. And I've got to be honest, I expected the live chat to be a little bit more city slicker today.
It's pretty 50-50.
And it's at least 50-50. And I think that a lot of folks are kind of going, yeah. Like I saw M. Aitken in the chat. I'm pretty sure they live rural, if I remember. I feel like I get to know some of you a little bit. M. Aitken said, like, wolf and coyote bounties have been around forever. So, this is something where I think we're all going to learn a little bit more. We'll do a little bit of digging. I guarantee that trappers are going to hear this episode, and I would love to hear from you to talk at ryanjesperson.com. We want you to have a fair shake. We want to have a good conversation about this. You can let us know what you think. I mean, Sylvia's not wrong to say the most destructive wildlife is human. Coyotes can be deterred. Says there's good research being done at the U of A. So, let us know what you think about this. It's an interesting subject matter. We know that there's not a lot of people talking about this, and that's why I thought that it was something good for our show to shine a light on. Dwayne, meantime, with the dad joke of the day. What do you get if you cross 250 moose with 250 deer? I think he needs 250,000. $500,000, which is decent, Dwayne. Okay. You prompted a courtesy laugh out of John, and you made me smile.
But I think this conversation, it's one of those ones where I don't think it's ever going to be settled. There's no easy answer on trying to live perfectly with animals. We're always going to be infringing on them and trying to control populations. And we've seen studies show that it never works perfectly. You try to control animal populations, there's always an outlier. There's always something that happens. It's a conversation where there's no right answer.
And we'll have these reminders, right? Like I think, a buddy of mine posted a video last year of a bobcat killing a rabbit in his front yard in suburban Calgary. And it was like the video went viral. Once a year or so, we'll get a reminder in our home city of Edmonton when someone will like hit a moose on the white mud on their way to work. And all of a sudden you go, yeah, gosh, right? These animals are around us, and our cities are expanding. And anyway, let us know what you think. Ms. KD says, I have no problem with hunting for sustenance and for First Nations and Indigenous cultural purposes. Hunting for trophies is gross. Ms. KD, by the way, I made a note here. I saw your earlier comment where you said you thought that the residential schools was a bad example to be invoked by our guest, Kim. Kim invoked slavery in residential schools, says there's things we did in the past that doesn't mean they're good to do now. I knew he'd probably light a fire under some people with that comment, and that was probably his intention. But Ms. KD says residential schools were a bad idea from the outset, so that's a bad example to use. Fair enough. You can keep the conversation going by, if you're watching this later on YouTube, leaving a comment on the episode. Make sure you share our social media content with hunters or trappers you think may have an opinion on this. And as a matter of fact, also, of course, conservation folks, animal welfare experts. And of course, thanks for subscribing to our YouTube channel and finding us wherever you get your podcasts. In just a moment, we're turning our eyes to business. A really significant delegation from the Alberta Chambers of Commerce just back from the Maritimes, where they were advocating for Alberta business priorities. This amid the resumption, fall session now at the Alberta Legislature. And so there's a lot happening. We want to make sure you're in the loop. And of course, we're 2 days away from Danielle Smith basically finding out what party members think of her performance thus far as premier. That leadership review, a big story to keep an eye on across the country. Several premiers have seen their fates hang in the balance over the past couple of weeks. Before we talk to Shauna Feth from the Alberta Chambers of Commerce, I want to remind you about the amazing work that's being done at California Closets. They're doing custom closets and storage solutions for the entire home, and that includes your garage. You can check out their website, californiaclosets.ca, and see exactly what they can do for that often forgotten square footage in your home. You know where your shovel is, your sprinkler? How long has your car been parked outside your garage? If you live at our house, the car's never been in the garage. And now is the time to make a garage storage system for snowboards, off-season tires, your car, whatever. Workbench, maybe tailored to your interests. Create organized space that makes enjoying hobbies and completing tasks that much easier. They are doing storage cabinets and premium a garage organization in the province of Alberta. You can book a free consultation today at californiaclosets.ca. Our friends at Friesen Brothers have a big weekend coming up right now. They've got the return of their vegan feast. That's November 2nd and 3rd. You can find out more on their website, friesen.com. These are in all the Edmonton area stores. So that brand new beautiful location on the traffic circle in Glenora, Rabbit Hill in South Edmonton, Fort Saskatchewan, Stony Plain, and all you can eat vegan feast for just $22 a person. I thought it was a typo at first. $22 a person, including the salad bar. You can find out more on their website, friesen.com. No reservations necessary. Go ahead and just show up. At Complete Care Restoration, they've got you covered in case of disaster, in case of emergency. They treat every single project like it's their own. We've seen them work in past. They're the ones that built our studio. Solving problems, by the way, along the way, like a pesky water leak. Amazing attention to detail. If you're facing fire damage, sewer backup, or mold issues in your home or business, look no further than Complete Care Restoration. And for those of you that would love to tell your family about a new job opportunity as you gather through the holiday season, if you are an electrician, if you're an apprentice, if you're a sales professional, if you work in HR, office management, Kubi Energy is scaling up its team faster than you'd believe in 4 different Canadian municipalities. Edmonton, Calgary, beautiful new location, Lethbridge, Kamloops, doing a ton of work out in BC, and they're looking for people who want to be part of Canada's green energy revolution. You can check out the careers link for more details online at kubienergy.ca. Every month, we're lucky to have the president and CEO of the Alberta Chambers of Commerce with her eye on Alberta business. It's Shauna Feth, who is just back from beautiful Halifax, where chambers from across the country were gathering for the Canadian Chamber of Commerce AGM. Typically, you join us kind of the first Monday of every month. People want, so that's why you've had a lot on your plate. You've been out of province. I have some specific questions, but generally speaking, once you get chambers from across the country, I imagine you see some things. Different jurisdictions have different challenges, but probably some shared challenges and shared opportunities too.
Absolutely. And I mean, essentially, the Chamber network across the country getting together gives us the opportunity to understand what's not just happening in our province. We tend to be really insular sometimes and just think about our own priorities and what's happening here within our boundaries. But having that opportunity to collaborate with our colleagues and really talk policy, really important policy that is going to support businesses across the country and in the province of Alberta. We're through the proxy process. We were really, really fortunate to have 86% of our chambers represented, which is unheard of.
86% of Alberta members.
Alberta Chamber
Wow.
members. So of the 108 chambers across the province, 86% were represented through our proxy process, which gave us about 30% of the voting delegation in the room, which gave us a lot of ability to get our Alberta policies through. So we were able to pass about 10 policies that are going to have direct impact on business in Alberta.
Wow, I want to dig into that in just a second, but is the chamber culture stronger in Alberta? I'm not asking you to pick fights with your colleagues across the country, but like those numbers are astounding. 30% of representation nationally.
Yeah.
That's something.
It is, yeah. And, I'm born and bred Alberta girl, so I think everything's better in Alberta. But
Yeah, sure.
we definitely have a very strong collegial, relationship with the 108 chambers in the province. And that's really our role at the Alberta Chambers, is to be dialed into what's happening on the ground in the grassroots of Alberta and what's happening with Alberta businesses.
I hosted the Premier's State of the Province yesterday, and she's addressing a room, and she's basically saying, like, we're the most competitive jurisdiction, we have the lowest taxes. She starts talking about the opportunity in obviously the energy sector and energy industry. There was some talk about AI tech data centers and the like. Obviously, the political message out of Alberta is very bullish on the province's potential. What vibe do you get once you've got all the chambers together? Do you think that that's a shared perspective? Are folks in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick and Manitoba kind of looking at Alberta and going, man, there really is an Alberta advantage? Do you think that communication goes both ways, from Alberta out and in toward Alberta?
I absolutely do believe that. And I think it's more, maybe not just Alberta, but there's a Western Canadian advantage, because we're seeing Saskatchewan is, having great strides in terms of their economy, in terms of investment into that province. Manitoba, I mean, they have ports and they have abilities to ship goods and services direct. So, I think about the Western provinces in general, but again, Alberta, I was on a panel yesterday for Meta Week in Barcelona, obviously virtually. Yeah. Because I didn't get home from there just overnight. But it's interesting because our consul general there did a fantastic job of just talking about, she's from Alberta, and she was just talking about the Alberta advantage in tech, in AI, in new minerals and exploration and mining of things like lithium. So it's out there. That message is getting out there broadly around the globe, that Alberta is a place to do business, and we're here and the doors are open, and we're here to support them as they're coming in. You're
not gonna have a favorite policy, but obviously I'm sure all 10 were great that were submitted by Alberta Chambers and approved by the federal network. But like, what's one or two that you were particularly proud of, or that that business owners, business operators that are tuning into this segment are going to be pretty excited to hear about?
Yeah, I think, all 10 are really important, but around things like, indexing, taxes, those types of policies that have direct impact on the bottom lines of our businesses, the policies that are directly dealing with some of the input costs, things like electricity, et cetera. So those are some of the ones that are going to have, direct bottom line impact right out of the gate for Alberta businesses. Alberta
MLAs, the government's back in action, and the opposition, Naheed Nenshi, not in, obviously in the legislature right now, doesn't have a seat, but the Alberta NDP hoping for some real energy under a new leader. And there's a lot happening, when it comes to fall and politics in the province of Alberta. We've got, sort of a summary here. I'm not going to ask you about every single one of them because there's a lot, but Albertans can expect to see an amendment to the Alberta Bill of Rights, the Health Statutes Amendment Act, early learning and childcare, education, meat inspection they're going to be taking a look at, fairness and safety in sport, bit of a controversial one there, Service Alberta Statutes, justice, finance, protection of privacy, access to information, all-season resorts, which is kind of interesting. Not a lot of people talking about that, but tourism has huge potential in Alberta. It's a big contributor to our economy. Yeah. What's one that you're really keeping an eye on?
Well, just overall, I mean, obviously we've not read through all the acts yet.
Yeah, no, we can't. We don't have access.
The All-Season Resorts Act is one that's been on our radar for a while, working with, the tourism sector in Alberta, knowing the impact that that's going to have on a lot of those resort communities, and not even just the resort communities, but the opportunity to potentially expand that into other jurisdictions where maybe they haven't necessarily been, they've been summer destinations and never really thought about what they could be doing in the winter. And now that's an option for them, which is really exciting, to look at that from a perspective of economic growth and ability to diversify in some smaller communities around the province.
Yeah, right on. I know some people are concerned that, I don't know, I mean, it depends who you talk to, but the implication that development costs could be on the rise for resort operators due to some stricter zoning or environmental requirements. And that's a fine balance for a government to try to find, It really environmental protection has to be a top priority. At the same time, you want to make sure that you're attracting investment in industries. When you talk about diversifying Alberta's economy and you look at the potential that Alberta has on tourism, I think it's probably a tough balance to find as a legislator.
Absolutely agree. But I think, the one thing we do know is that that striking that balance, although it's difficult, is a very high priority for our business community. I mean, they don't want to be doing things that are not going to be in line with the communities they grew up in. And we're in this industry to showcase our beautiful province, and nobody is going out with the intent of let's do development just for the sake of development and to get some dollars. It's always with an eye to, at least in my experience, it's always with an eye to ensuring that we maintain the landscape, the community, those core values that come with being an Alberta business owner.
Yeah, the government is forecasting that a lot of these acts, or at least several of them, are going to strengthen consumer protections, things like privacy rights and transparency. There's obviously got to be implications for business there.
There is. The one thing that we'll be keeping our eye on is, that these regulations don't increase compliance costs for businesses. Especially when you look at staff training, if they need infrastructure upgrades as a result, especially when we look at the areas of like privacy, for instance, what is that going to mean in terms of upgrades and technology solutions? There's healthcare, food safety. Obviously, our agriculture industry is massive in the province. So that's one of the things we'll be keeping our eye on is that compliance piece and making sure that businesses aren't being unduly burdened as all of these new acts come into fruition. Yeah.
You and I chat about once a month, and we've talked a lot over the past, 6 to 12 months about labor shortages and recruitment, retention, increasing workforce participation. Are you satisfied early on? I mean, I'm kind of asking you to look into your crystal ball. This is like asking people about the hockey season in the preseason, or at least at the first few games. But are you satisfied that this is being meaningfully addressed by this government?
Yes, definitely. And I probably would be, I would love to give a prediction that the Oilers are taking the cup this year.
Johnny gets nervous when we start predicting cup winners.
But he's shaking his head.
Sorry,
Johnny.
I'll predict that they'll make the playoffs. How's that?
Okay.
We'll be. He's okay. Yeah, he gets nervous. I don't blame him.
Sorry, Johnny.
It's okay.
All right. Well, you can come back on me. I mean, this is being recorded, so.
We'll blame you if they miss playoffs. It's on you, Shauna, on the 31st of October.
So definitely. So some of the amendments aimed at education and early childcare definitely can help address some of our labor shortages, getting some of that workforce back into participation mode, and getting some of those skills that we need aligned with industry needs. There's a lot of that. Obviously, we have several projects we're working on around talent that the provincial government has supported. The Talent Development Task Force, we had a panel on that last year. Or this year, early this year. I think it was in January, actually. Wow, I can't believe how fast the year's gone. But anyway.
You and me both.
So there's that going on. Plus, we have a lot of talent events happening across the province to look at underrepresented populations in the workforce, to really look at getting long-term unemployed people back out, getting into those positions and having, that opportunity for that fantastic career or their next career. So.
We got an interesting question here from Travis. I want to recognize that you're the president and CEO of the Alberta Chambers, and he has a question about Edmonton. So, I think generally speaking, here's his question. He says, "How is there a labor shortage if we have damn near 10% unemployment in Edmonton?" So I'm referencing here, this is Alberta government numbers, economic-dashboard.alberta.ca. The unemployment rate in Alberta, if you can compare it to the rest of the country, and you'll see unemployment rate by province. They're having the toughest time in Newfoundland and Labrador. Alberta's second for unemployment. In Lethbridge, they're faring the best at about 5.1% unemployment. Our home city of Edmonton, about 9% unemployment right now. Are we talking about like skilled trades, skilled labor, specific skill sets? Like when we talk about labor shortages, what are your members telling you?
Yeah, it's definitely in those skilled areas. So, a lot in the technology sector, a lot in, skilled trades. Obviously, you probably have seen the advertisements. The provincial government has a large campaign going on right now around recruiting to skilled trades, because we have massive shortages there with some major projects and investments that have been put into the province on some major projects, and lacking the skills that we need there. I think another thing to consider too, though, is we saw the highest immigration rates that we've ever seen last year. So we do know that we have, high populations of individuals that we're trying to get into the workforce. And we have individuals too, newcomers that have skills, but because there's challenges in getting them recognized or accredited for whatever reason in the province of Alberta, they are not able to do the jobs that they need to do as well. So there's a whole bunch of different factors that play into that unemployment rate, and we really need to pay attention to where we need the skills and where the gaps are, and again, a lot in the trades and in technology, IT, clean tech, some of those areas where we're really just expanding rapidly in terms of the industries themselves in the province.
We talked a few episodes ago, like this week, with Chris Severson Baker. He's executive director over at Pembina Institute, and they've got their own take on the International Energy Agency's World Energy Outlook. And it's always interesting when you get something like this from an international body to talk to people in different industries from different perspectives on what they make of the global energy outlook. But I have to assume that this has been on your team's radar at the Alberta Chambers of Commerce.
Yeah, and I mean, it just goes to the comments I was just making about, what does our energy industry look like? I mean, in that report, it was, by 2030, the demand that we have right now for traditional oil and gas is going to peak, and we're going to look at changes, right? And so really, like I said, that clean tech and that clean energy area has just been expanding exponentially in the province of Alberta. And we really, as a province, have the ability to lead that, whether it be wind, whether it be solar, whether it be storage, all of the things that we're really breaking ground on here in the province. And I think the really positive part too is, the world needs more of what Alberta has. So those critical minerals, like I was saying, so lithium, nickel, cobalt, that's all stuff that's needed for tech, for things like batteries, for EVs and electronic vehicles. So it's an opportunity to, I see in terms of what's being reported is, for our mining sector to ramp up. You look to our province next door, Saskatchewan, and they have just a massive mining industry in Saskatchewan. And I think we have those critical minerals that we can really have some impact on that next iteration of energy and clean tech.
I feel like I wish I would have invested in lithium like 20 years ago. But do you want to go on the record? Most folks politely decline to go on the record and make a prediction on November 5th and who's going to take the White House. Do you have a gut instinct, or you want to steer clear of that?
You know what? I think I'll just.
Yeah, I know exactly.
I'll pass on that one.
Yeah. No,
otherwise,
very few. Johnny went on the record yesterday.
I was going to say Johnny. Otherwise, Johnny's going to.
Johnny thinks no. He went on the record yesterday. He thinks Kamala's going to take it.
Well, I think before we get out of here, we'll look at the early voting numbers. 60 million people already voted mail-in and early voting. So
we'll see.
After this, we'll show
we've got
numbers
we've
this
got
morning.
We've got a presentation ready.
Excellent. Okay,
they're
I'm going to hang around for that.
But
then.
you and Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre and everybody else has to have a plan either way. Whether the Republicans or the Democrats take the White House and the House and the Senate. And so what are some of the issues or some of the areas that you think are going to be Alberta's top priorities, or what are some of the top implications for Alberta depending on the outcome of this presidential election?
Well, I think, pages of them, but really looking at kind of the critical ones for Alberta, just those the pipeline projects and the energy exports. We know what happened in terms of projects in the past. The leadership changed, and a deal that is signed all of a sudden goes in the garbage. So making sure that we understand that the U.S. is our top consumer of our energy, so making sure that we pay attention to those policies, clean energy and carbon policies. I mean, that's for our country as well something to be paying attention to, because both countries are tackling that big emissions question and looking at how do we do that but still maintain the resource sector, still maintain our businesses and the industries that support the province itself. So thinking about what we need to look at is, are there going to be additional carbon taxes coming in as a result? Are there going to be subsidies for renewables potentially? Hydrogen production incentives. So there's lots of things like that. A lot of what people are talking about is the tariffs that have been announced.
That's a huge implication of a Trump presidency.
It is,
that really impacted Canadian producers and Canadian businesses last go around, right? 2016 to 2020.
Absolutely. Yeah, specifically in, agriculture, manufacturing, lumber, we really,
time.
Exactly.
Steel.
Yeah. And we have, we're excited that we have Jason Cripps joining us from the Alberta Forest Products Association for our fall board meeting coming up in November. So he's going to be speaking to that in terms of, we'll be past election then.
You guys have a ton going on all the time, by the way.
Yeah,
abchamber.ca, people can check out the events.
Yeah.
So you've got that kind of Buy American push as well, where American federal contracts could obviously become harder to win if the Buy American policy is strengthened. I don't know. Do you perceive that there's any difference from the American perspective on buying Canadian versus buying stuff from China? Or Buy American is pretty much Buy American. That neighborly relationship. Maybe it benefits us a little bit, but I'm not sure 100%.
Yeah, it's too bad it can't be Buy North American.
Buy North American would be a nice one.
I think we should just.
We do a lot of manufacturing in Mexico in that case, probably.
Well, and ironically, a lot of our products and services are going across the border several times before they actually hit consumer shelves. So, but we really just will have to think about as businesses if that really becomes a push that looking at alternative partnerships, with U.S.-based companies that can kind of circumvent any of the negative impacts that could potentially have.
I've sort of seen some credible people suggest that this could make the worker, the recruitment and retention, a little bit tougher if labor and immigration policy in the United States intensifies competition as is expected for skilled labor. Do you have suggestions, or is there conversation happening among your members on what stepping up the game could look like in that area?
Well, I think it all goes to that. What is that attraction and retention policy? And Alberta has been really good about attracting people to the province. In terms of the actual the mobility, so it could limit mobility depending on what president comes in and what kind of policies they're putting in place. That's going to be anybody going into the States or coming out of the States. It could be limiting for individuals. And again, we're in an intense competition for some of that skilled labor that we'd already talked about. So it's maybe going to impact specific industries, but there again, this is just. I'm just shooting in the dark, really, because we don't know.
You have no idea. Nobody has any idea right now. Nobody really has. This is the tightest election they're saying maybe in American history.
Yeah, and we're just going to pay attention once the election's done. We're just going to be really paying attention to that cross-border relationship, and again, just our fall board meeting and deputy ministers dinner. That's the whole theme of that entire day is going to be we're bringing in people to talk about that U.S. trade relationship and how the businesses in Alberta can capitalize on it and how we can mitigate or navigate some of the potential new challenges that are going to be put up depending on who's the new leader.
I like that you guys do the deputy ministers meeting. Ministers are good to talk to. I talked to my fair share of them yesterday. Ministers have power. Ministers have the prestige. Ministers are in the hot seat. But ministers also can be shuffled in cabinet shuffles or after elections or what have you. Deputy ministers are the ones that are running the ministry, right? Ministers will never say that. But deputy ministers have a real command of their nonpartisan. I think it's a really neat opportunity that you guys fill a room with them and your members can get a real understanding of what's happening.
Yeah, and we love having the ministers as well for our political action day.
Of course,
we have we're very, very fortunate that we have a great relationship with the government and we're able to get the individuals in the room. But the thing about the deputy ministers is there's a layer of consistency there because a lot of them have been in the role for a lot longer than the ministers themselves. They have a really good handle on, and obviously deputy ministers change out too. It's a cyclical thing, but for the most part, they have, a really good understanding of that ministry, that portfolio, and they are the ones with, boots on the ground actually working to get policies through and to get the supports in place for the businesses in the province. So we love having chats with them to just find out, down and dirty what's going on, and, where can we capitalize, what can we do, to work together to make sure that the Alberta economy and environment for business is the best it can be.
Yeah, it's not this month, but your Political Action Day is one of the highlights of my calendar year. I've Alberta Chambers has invited me to be a part of it, I think, for like 10 years now.
Yeah.
And I'll say a couple of things. Number one, it's Chatham House rules. So it means that like what's said in the room stays in the room.
Yeah.
And nobody's tweeting anything, nobody's recording anything. So people say what they really think. And it's like some of the most like explosive, insightful, valuable political commentary I've ever experienced or delivered in my life. And I will say this as a credit to Alberta Chambers is you say you have a great relationship with government. Alberta Chambers has maintained a great relationship with governments for a really long time under different parties, different leaders, and that's not always easy to do. But I do think that that's one thing and a sort of probably a benefit of membership is that that advocacy is happening regardless of who holds office, which is a real positive and something you guys should be proud of.
Well, thank you for that. And that media panel that you're talking about is a fan
So
favorite.
fun.
It's a fan favorite. So yeah,
it was
we'll look
me,
forward to it.
Jen Gerson, and Graham Thompson last year.
Yeah,
and,
it was fantastic.
And my favorite part last year, she's not here to defend herself, but I had some fun with Jen because she had just ripped me for my Trudeau interview.
Yeah.
And then I think we were sitting beside each other like 6 days later.
Yeah.
And she's great, and we had a lot of fun with that. So, Shauna, you have tickets on sale again until November 4th. You've got the Talent Development Symposium coming up, and then of course that fall board meeting that we're talking about. It'll be November 8th, and the Deputy Minister's Dinner, which is a great opportunity. If you're not yet a member of the Alberta Chambers of Commerce, you can find out more about getting involved on their website, abchamber.ca. Eye on Alberta Business, featuring their president and CEO, Shauna Feth, proudly presented by the Alberta Chambers of Commerce. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, thank you. And just the dates for Talent Symposium is November 27th.
Okay,
and
cool.
Fall board meeting and Deputy Minister's Dinner is the 28th. So
Great stuff.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you bet. People can check out the events link for more. Your team is like hammering away at this. That's fantastic to see. Both of those events happening back-to-back days at the Chateau Lacombe in downtown Edmonton. Again, abchamber.ca. You can hang out here for a sec if you want.
What Johnny has to say about what's going on south of the border.
So
I'm not
November
going anywhere.
5th. We don't even know. Like we're booking our guests for November 6th, and we don't know what they're going to be talking about. We don't know. We know that they're going to be talking.
Scarier than Halloween. That's for sure.
Well, potentially.
But
what's advanced ballots are always interesting. Advanced ballots literally never determine, or at least they can have a huge influence on the outcome of election, but it's way too early to deduce anything. But where are you at right now? Let's remind folks you're born and raised for a big part of your life in Florida. Right, you're an American boy. So where's your head at right now?
Like you just said, early voting being pushed by not just the Dems, the Republicans, right? And the Republicans, even though they were kind of against mail-in ballots with all the stuff that happened with Trump in the last election, they've still been pushing for people to do that. So you are seeing a lot. Like this morning, we wake up and I'm just refreshing all the sites. Right, 60 million votes cast already, almost 59 million something.
What?
That's pretty crazy. Yeah. So if you go to 59,813,536 mail-in and early in-person votes cast nationally, which is absolutely insane.
The American population's under 350 million.
It's like insane.
And that includes minors.
Yeah. So if we look at early voting, like Michigan, and these are numbers. So I'm just going to put this up, and I know people are going to say CNN, but this is what CNN polling suggested for some swing states in early voting that it would show. This from October 23rd
for the podcast
to 28th.
listeners, what are we seeing here?
So we're seeing 61 Dems, 35% in Michigan. Wisconsin, a big one. That's a big swing state. They predicted 60%. Dems, 38% Republican. And then in Pennsylvania, this one we were talking about yesterday, where, high population of Puerto Ricans did this stuff that happened at MSG, caused something to happen maybe there. They were saying it was going to go 57 to 40. And this is early voting only. This isn't like nationally at the end of the race. And so some early numbers I just saw today, and again, NBC News is where this is coming from. It's showing Michigan 47-42 for the Dems, in Wisconsin 41-35, and in Pennsylvania, we were talking about this yesterday, which is always super close. It's showing in early voting 58-32. So did all this stuff we were talking about yesterday, all the controversy at MSG, all the celebrities that have been coming out, Latino and Latina, who are like, Puerto Rico is
You're
being...
talking about the floating island of garbage, Joe?
Pennsylvania doubled their Latin population in the last 20 years. So a lot of Puerto Rican descendant people are there.
How about Buzz Aldrin?
Buzz Aldrin endorsing Trump.
Endorsing Trump yesterday.
Well, at the last moment. This is crazy as well.
Yeah. Horse Lakes Ranch says that these are numbers about people who say they voted. That doesn't necessarily mean much. Sylvia says these American states are not counted yet.
I'm not saying
these are people who are casting. You're just giving us some interesting fodder.
And you're showing
and I'm showing you this, which is Nathan Vanderclip, who's an international correspondent. The Globe picked up Nathan's story that suggests that polling has always underestimated Trump. And says that here's why this time may be different, and he is correct. I mean, this is the tale of the tape, that the Trump era has tarnished the business of assessing public opinion. Let me reference his report. In 2016, polls did all right at gauging national vote percentages, but get this, 90% of polls, 90% wrongly predicted that Trump would lose in 2016. In 2020, polls correctly predicted the outcome, but they underestimated Trump's performance so badly that they produced the worst polling error of any presidential election over the past 40 years, and polling at the state level had the worst rate of error in 20 years. So it could just be that Donald Trump, I know people roll their eyes at this word, but Donald Trump is such a disruptor and such an effective disruptor. Like if you listen to, I told you I only listened to the first hour of his Rogan interview, but he came in right at the very beginning and quite rightfully said, he's like, when he was talking about making his appointments in 2016, he goes, I was never a politician. I didn't know what I was doing. I was taking advice from some people. He said some of it good, some of it very bad, which everyone can attest. But the fact of the matter is like the establishment, and this was his whole drain the swamp narrative. I mean, whether or not he actually drained it is a different conversation. But it was true because he came in as someone who was like, had a primetime television spot. He was a Manhattan developer. And I think it's tough for like political watchers to get a sense of like, there's really not even a Canadian equivalent. Like I can't in good faith compare him to like Kevin O'Leary, who was running for a flash in the pan. O'Leary was one of like 17 candidates, maybe kind of sort of considering seeking the conservative leadership. You remember this back in this is like 8 years ago or something like that. But that's as close as it gets. In Canada, we don't really have a really strong, bullish, abrasive, compelling, successful personality that could come in and like shake the entire parliament. They could like shake the entire establishment. But that's what Trump has done. And so right now you might say, people say, how can somebody, 34 felonies and January 6th and like all this kind of stuff, how could he possibly have a shot again at the presidency? And he very well could be.
He could. Yeah,
president again.
Nationally, it's still like right down the line.
I think
if you look at all the votes, even with what we were talking about in the swing states, it's still like 42-38. But here's the big thing, and you're right. I like how you brought up the other side of this because you're right. Even though both parties are saying, get out the early vote, get out the mail-in votes, even Trump's team, who is like forever been like mail-in votes are crooked, the thing is Republicans go to the polls the day of. And especially Trump supporters, because they don't trust electronic, early voting. They don't trust mail-in votes.
Yeah.
So these numbers could be totally different when we wake up next week on Tuesday and see that an amazing amount of Trump supporters just got up the day of, stood in line, and wrote in pencil and put it into an actual box.
Yeah. How about this comment? Send Buzz Aldrin to the moon and leave him there.
He went there.
Oh, no. He's like, again. Kenzie says Nevada and Arizona flipping as of last night. We'll see. I mean, obviously there's still, this is like looking at the first 6 meters of a 100-meter dash. Usain Bolt would be behind at this point, but
last two elections, they were decided by like we're talking like so slim.
Oh, man.
So like, let's get all the votes in, great, but watch those swing states: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin,
We shall.
Nevada. Like those are going to be the ones that really decide the election this year, and it's going to be by, I hate to say it because afterwards there's going to be an uproar. It's going to be by, thousands of votes.
Yeah.
It's not going to be by millions.
Just
right? It's
Alberta.
gonna be,
I mean, Alberta was Alberta's government was determined by fewer than 2,000 votes if you kind of do the creative math. But also, it is what it is. Michael here brings it back a little bit more local. Says another story you got to follow, Jespo. Alberta nurses just rejected the latest offer. Things are about to get even more interesting in Alberta healthcare. Cheryl says, "Can we do a show on nurse practitioners?" We have in past, Cheryl, but certainly that's something we can keep an eye on. She says we switched in the spring. I can't tell you how happy we are, she says, and it was a UCP initiative for which I grudgingly give a grateful nod. That from Cheryl. I bet the UCP will take it. As we wrap, I'll let you know, of course, our next episode, that'll be November 1st. That's tomorrow. If you're listening to this the day we're doing it, will be the final show before that UCP AGM. It's expected, based on registration, to be the largest political gathering in Canada. And Danielle Smith will be facing a leadership review. We're going to figure out how the hosts of the discourse figure that she'll do. Founding president of the UCP, Erica Barudis, and Cheryl Oates, who quarterbacked the Saskatchewan NDP campaign.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson. Executive producer Josh Dunford. Technical producer John Hicks. General manager Katie Cook-Chivers. Account coordinator